Brian can't be here. Deborah is babysitting. Laurel's at the doctor. Whatever. We are fewer today. And I want to do something a little different for part of the time, which is something that one does sometimes in a workshop, an MFA workshop, which is to get you guys to do more of the talking. But first of all, let me ask if you have any residual questions about Williams's biography, about his life, his influence, etc. And then we're going to start looking at specific poems.
I just think it's astonishing. I was married to a doctor, and
Mhm.
I don't know, how did he do anything else? How did he write poetry?
I know. Paul Mariani, I communicated with him some when I was doing my book on Williams, and he said Williams had the energy of six men. You know, he was just really so completely hyper driven. Because yeah, and he was a family man too. You know, he had two kids. Um, he had an active medical practice. He was going every Sunday over to New York City to meet with his artist friends, the planners and shapers of what they hoped would be the American Renaissance, you know. He was just really so completely into what he was doing. And of course, most of his poems are short. And his output is so uneven. Like I've just been rereading a lot of his poems, and there's a lot of them that are like really not very good, you know, that are if you look at the complete later poems, especially before you get to the ones after his strokes and so on. There's a lot that are kind of flat. They're just jotted off. They're like something that you would write in 5 minutes. But then the ones that are great are just amazing. You know, I was talking to Peter about Williams and he said he's fresh. And it's true. He's fresh. His voice is fresh. You know, it's something very much in the tradition of Whitman in certain ways, although formally his choices are completely different. He doesn't write long line poems. He doesn't use anaphora. He doesn't carry on, you know, page after page after page the way Whitman does. Uh,
But there are some echoes of Whitman in his words.
oh, yeah, for sure. And in his commitments, he's a little d democratic poet. And he's a little d democratic poet who wants to write about the American people and who wants to use American English to do so.
And the American land.
Yeah, and the American land. Yeah, yeah,
And once in a while, Williams will use long lines like the high bridge above the
yeah, that's
Tagus River
beautiful.
at Toledo,
Yeah,
which I think is one of his most beautiful poems. Lines so long they barely keep their rhythm, but they do.
yeah, yeah,
Also, Ann told me that he used to write poems, jot them down when his car was stopped at a red light.
yeah, yeah. I
So,
mentioned that last week. Yeah,
yeah, okay, I didn't
yeah.
know if you
I'm
had.
pretty sure the Red Wheelbarrow was a red light poem, you know. Um, and some of them were notes. Some of them were just
Yeah, this is just to say.
this is just to say it was a refrigerator note that he left for his wife, you know. He's pretty amazing. He's pretty amazing. And he talks in his late poems a lot about, he says the dream is in pursuit. He obviously liked the finished product, you know, but he just wanted to live this life of constant creativity. And he uses the image of the unicorn. It's like the unicorn, you know, chasing after the unicorn, chasing after this rare beast, which is the creature of the imagination, you know. Yeah, Douglas?
Yeah, and this is just to say there's a whole discussion on that on YouTube that
Uh-huh.
were, and they were somebody was questioning whether or not it was really poetry, and he says, of course, he says people just don't believe poetry can happen in their lives.
Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. My dissertation director, Spengeman, told me that he once read a 42-page academic essay on This Is Just to Say. And I'm, you are kidding. He goes, no, it's all about language theory. You know, it's all about language contracts and so on, you know, but we're going to talk about that poem. I once spent a half hour in a class discussing it with my students, and it was really fun. Yes, Barry.
Two quick things. Number one, I noticed in one of these the short poems that, or not the short poems, but that first group, that he referred to Jew eyes.
Yeah.
So I wondered whether is he also anti-Semitic? Is
He's
Yeah,
that
very Jewish.
he's partly Jewish. His mother
okay?
was partly Jewish. Yeah.
And he's very frank if he refers to somebody Italian or black or
Okay.
Hispanic or whatever.
Yeah.
He just is
And
not.
and my
uh,
my other thing is at some point, Anne, I would love you to expound on what about you think is bad poetry. You referred to a lot of things as bad poems. I would like you to give us an example and tell me why it's a bad poem.
I will, but not right now. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good challenge. Sure, absolutely. There's a heck of a lot of bad poetry, and I've written some of it myself, you know.
Yeah,
Serious, seriously.
Peter, you didn't quite finish your thought about his racial descriptions.
You mean the high bridge above the Tagus
No,
River?
Well,
no.
you were just saying
That's
that
science.
he was
Right,
frank.
right. That he's from the New York area, where at least, in his time, to refer to the ethnic group or racial group somebody came from is almost I'm not saying there's no possibility of prejudice involved with it, though I don't think Williams was prejudiced, but it's much more casual than it has become, where people are shy about, even saying anything
Yeah,
that suggests, where your people come from.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, his is pretty blunt, you know. But the important thing to me is that, I mean, his patients and the people that he cared about and the people that he wrote about were just all kinds of people, you know. And a lot of his patients were first generation United States residents. A lot of his patients were poor. A certain number of his patients were like completely illiterate, you know. And he really liked them. He found them fascinating. He loved their voices, he loved their customs, he loved their eccentricities, you know. He's a really good short story writer too, you guys. I would recommend a book called The Doctor Stories, which is taken straight from his case histories, but also a book called The Farmer's Daughters, which has the doctor stories in it, but it has other things as too. The Farmer's Daughters is a really beautiful book. It's he's just writing about the life around him and the people around him. So much so that at one point he forgot to change the names and he got sued for libel and he had to pay like $3,000 or something, because he revealed some secrets that should not be revealed about his neighbors. Yeah, whatever. But let's start talking about some poems, okay? The first poem I want to talk about is The Wanderer. This is a really important poem, although it's not a perfect poem. It's kind of headlong and awkward, I think, sometimes, but it is the poem in which he rewrote his early Keatsian poem, Philip and Orody. His early Keatsian poem, Douglas?
Yeah, I in the book that I got with the collected poems,
Yeah,
it says The Wanderer, a Rococo study, but underneath it says the first version.
the first version.
Yeah,
Of the Wanderer again.
of The Wanderer.
I don't know more than one version. I don't
Oh,
know
okay.
the version.
I couldn't find another one, but
Yeah,
that's what
I
it
don't
says
know.
in the.
I don't know. The first version he never published. It's Philip and Orody, and it's kind of based on the plot of Hamlet. It's about a tormented prince, and everybody ends up dying of poison, and the tormented prince, who's Philip, ends up riding his palfrey out into the woods, and so on and so forth. So it's like pretty wretched. It's pretty awful. But he took that essential story about the creation of a poet and rewrote it um, in The Wanderer. Okay, so The Wanderer has one of his favorite characters. He really, really grooved on his English grandmother, Emily Dickinson, who was a tough old coot, and he liked that she was tough. Later, we're going to read a poem called The Last Words of My English Grandmother. And she's just sassy and spunky and irritable and, kind of indestructible. So she becomes the muse figure here. Now, think about what muse figures are usually like. Usually these glamorous females who descend from the heavens and they say, "Oh, yon poet," and that would be Williams's first idea, the Orody type muse figure, the delicate young woman or the beautiful goddess. Here, his muse figure is this grouchy, forceful grandmother figure who disguises herself in these, she's a shapeshifter. So she's magical. She says, even in the time when as yet I had no certain knowledge of her, she sprang from the nest, a young crow whose first flight circled the forest. I know now how then she showed me her mind, reaching out to the horizon, she close above the treetops. I saw her eyes straining at the new distance, and as the woods fell from her flying, likewise they fell from me, as I followed, so that I strongly guessed all that I must put from me, to come through ready for the high courses. So this guy is in his early 30s. He's a doctor. He's married. He's got kids. And he's trying to figure out what it is that he wants to commit himself to as far as being a poet. And he's going to tell you in the next few lines. But one day, crossing the ferry with the great towers of Manhattan before me, out at the prow with the sea wind blowing, I had been wearying many questions which she had put on to try me. How shall I be a mirror to this modernity? That is maybe the single most important question. Like, I talked about T.S. Eliot asking the overwhelming question. This is Williams's overwhelming question. How shall I be a mirror to this modernity? How shall I write the modern United States of my time and place, of my people, of their work, of their struggles, political history, eco history, all the rest of it? Okay. And that's what this poem is kind of enacting in a ritual fashion. So she now becomes a seagull, from a crow to a seagull, and she's always like challenging him to follow. Come, cried my mind, and by her might that was upon us, we flew above the river, seeking her, gray gulls among the white, in the air speaking as she had willed it. I am given, cried I. Now I know it. So this is like a religious, you know, pagan baptism. I know now all my time is forspent. For me, one face is all the world. This composite face of the muse, the grandmother, the wildness, the crow, the eagle, the seagull, in whom age in age is united in different out of sequence marvelously, right? And then to go on more, she's beating him up. She's showing him, she strikes him with her wing. And she says, what? Look at these people. And he starts looking around. Now, this is similar to Eliot's passage in The Wasteland, Unreal City, where I had not thought death had undone so many, when he sees that vision out of Dante of the spiritless spirits, the people flowing back and forth across the bridge in London. But it's really different at the same time. Here, there came crowds walking, men as visions with expressionless, animate faces, empty men with shell-thin bodies jostling close above the gutter, hasting nowhere. And then for the first time, I really saw her, really scented the sweat of her presence and fell back sickened, right? So these are old men with red cheeks, young men in gay suits. See them dogged, quivering, impassive. Well, are these the ones you envied? When Williams writes about the body, it's a juicy body. It's a gritty body. It might be an ugly body. It might be a body that's hungry, that's deformed, that's knobby, that's dressed in cheap clothes and cheap jewelry, but it's a body. He is so physical in his writing. And, as Kenneth Burke said of him, the erotic sense, not just in the sense of sexual desire, but in the sense of fleshiness, is everywhere in his writing. And to me, that's just like the huge difference between him and Eliot. Williams is very much of earth, you know. Um, okay, and then he says, "To you, horrible old woman, who know all fires out of the bodies of all men that walk with lust at heart, to you, O mighty crafty prowler, after the youth of all cities, drunk with the sight of thy archness, all the youth that come to you, you having the knowledge rather than to those uninitiate, to you, marvelous old queen, give me always a new marriage." So, like, she's a dirty old lady, and he's like, "Come on, you're my gal. You're the one I want to inspire me, you know." And then we have the labor strikes. So, really important silk workers strikes. I think it's around 1912 in the area of the Passaic River in Paterson, New Jersey. Um, and he's writing about the strikes, and he's writing about the incipient violence and the poverty, and he's writing about his own desire to be able to somehow write about this, somehow help these people. He says, "Nowhere the subtle, everywhere the electric." That's what Whitman's word, electric. I sing the body electric. A short bread line before a hitherto empty tea shop. No questions, all stood patiently, dominated by one idea, something that carried them as they always wanting to be carried. But what is it? I asked. And they says, why, since I have failed them, can it be anything but their own brood? Can it be anything but brutality? On that at least they're united. That at least is their bean soup, their calm bread, and a few luxuries. And he's still like, and then faces all knotted up like burls on oaks, grasping, fox snouted, thick lipped, sagging breasts and protruding stomachs, rasping voices, filthy habits with the hands, nowhere you, everywhere the electric, ugly, venomous, gigantic, tossing me as a great father his helpless infant till it shriek with ecstasy and its eyes roll and its tongue hangs out. I am at peace again, old queen. I listen clearer now. And then she takes him out into the nature that surrounds the Patterson area, out to the Jersey mountains. And she's telling him, look at the trees, look at the air's clear coolness, look at the richness of greenery. But she says, she's just talking and she says, look there, see them. They're in the outfield with the horses, see them there, bowed by their passions, crushed down, that had been raised as a roof beam. So I find in Williams such incredible, um, not just sympathy, but fellow feeling with people whose lives are a huge economic struggle, whose lives are like hard physical labor, and also women whose lives are hard physical labor, like 10 babies in the same bed, delivering those babies without all the medical modern appliances and so on. Um, so then finally, I'm going to skip toward the end because I want to be able to move on. But really, really important stuff that happens in the final section, St. James Grove. And he's been through this 8 days long kind of holy ritual of initiation, getting, bossed around by the old queen, getting flown around the countryside, seeing these visions of the laboring people, seeing these visions of, you know, kind of ugliness and greed, but also labor and the visions of natural beauty at the same time. And so it came to that last day when she, leading by the hand, we went out early in the morning. I heavy of heart, for I knew the novitiate was ended, the ecstasy was over, the life begun. In my woolen shirt and the pale blue necktie my grandmother gave me. I love that little detail. He's wearing his grandma's gifts, this beloved tough grandma, the old coot. There I went with the old queen right past the houses of my friends down the hill to the river, as on any usual day, any errand. Alone, walking under trees, I went with her, she with me in her wild hair, by Santiago Grove, and presently she bent forward and knelt by the river, the Passaic, that filthy river. And there, dabbling her mad hands, she called me close beside her. Raising the water then in the cupped palm, she bathed our brows, wailing and laughing. River, we are old, you and I. We are old and by bad luck beggars. Lo, the filth in our hair, our bodies stink. Old friend, here I have brought you the young soul you long asked of me. Stand forth, river, and give me the old friend of my revels. Give me the well-worn spirit, for here I have made a room for it, and I will return to you forthwith the youth you have long asked of me. Send forth, river, and give me the old friend of my revels. And the filthy Passaic consented. Then she, leaping up with a fierce cry, enter, youth, into this bulk. Enter, river, into this young man. Then the river began to enter my heart, eddying back cool and limpid into the crystal beginning of its days. But with a rebound, it leapt forward, muddy, then black and shrunken, till I felt the utter depth of its rottenness, the vile breadth of its degradation, and dropped down, knowing this was me now. But she lifted me, and the water took a new tide, again into the older experiences, and so backward and forward it tortured itself within me until time had been washed finally under, and the river had found its level, and its last motion had ceased, and I knew all. It became me. And I knew this for double certain, for there whitely I saw myself being borne off under the water. I could have shouted out in my agony at the sight of myself departing forever, but I bit back my despair, for she had averted her eyes, by which I knew well what she was thinking, and so the last of me was taken. And so this is the vow that he makes. He says, I I have died into this river which once was so clear and pure, and is now so degraded, so squalid, with industrialization, with, pollution, with industrial pollution, with environmental damage, right? And he says what? He surrenders to this. The river fills him, he fills it. And then the muse says, be mostly silent. Well, that's a laugh because Williams is anything but mostly silent. But she says, in memory of this clear marriage, the child I've brought you in these late years, live, river, live in luxuriance, remembering this our son, in remembrance of me and my sorrow, and of the new wandering. So I think it's a pretty cool poem. It's definitely a kind of Künstlerroman, it's a narrative about the creation of the artist, right? And he remains pretty true to this vision and this commitment for the next 50 years, almost 50 years of his writing life. He deliberately chooses to remain in this place. Although, I mean, he had choices, he had opportunities. Um, he deliberately chooses to write about the people that he's been writing about here. Like Whitman, Williams doesn't really write about the bankers and the lawyers and the presidents. He just doesn't. He writes about the people. He writes about his family. He writes about his children, his wife, his grandchildren. He writes about to some extent, in a kind of veiled fashion, his love affairs. But he doesn't write about the kind of upper classes of society. They're just not something that he chooses to focus on. So before we move on, any questions or comments about this strange poem, Douglas?
Yeah, well, I love this poem, but I went looking through, and the version that you read is very different than this one that I have that they refer to as the first version. Just not like massively different sections, but the wording is a little bit different. I could scan it and send it to you.
Yeah, that's cool. That's
Yeah.
cool. What I'm reading is from William Carlos Williams' Selected Poems, edited by Charles Tomlinson.
Oh, okay. I have the collected poems in 2 volumes.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've got that too, but that's more unwieldy,
Yeah.
Fun for the moment. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments on this? Yes.
I was wondering what the Passaic River is like now. I
Awful.
mean, is it cleaner?
I doubt it.
Unlikely.
Unlikely.
So,
But I mean, that's a problem with almost all of America's rivers.
Yeah.
There was a Greenpeace pamphlets like 25 years ago that referred to the Mississippi, the lower Mississippi anyway, as a chemical soup beyond scientific understanding. It's hard to get back from that.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
The
Well,
Hudson has improved.
there was a Clean Water Act passed, and
Yeah.
I imagine that would be way worse had we not had the Clean Water Act.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that the Passaic is still probably pretty polluted. We could do a little research into that.
You
Not
can
a-
do it if you do a search. There's pages of photographs of the Passaic.
Yeah. At least it's not the one that caught on fire. You know.
Hoga
I
in
mean,
Cleveland.
imagine
Yeah.
you're catching on fire. Isn't that the Cuyahoga?
The Cuyahoga in Cleveland, yeah.
Yeah.
In Ohio.
Yeah, that takes some doing. That really takes some doing. Um,
There-
go ahead.
Laurel's got her hand up.
Laurel.
And
Yeah, so the Passaic actually is getting somewhat cleaned up. I was interested. This reminded me an awful lot of some of Whitman's poetry,
Yeah.
and the crossing on the ferry sort of struck me immediately. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa, and the description of actual people and the sort of grittiness of real life and his commitment to be part of it.
Williams
And
is very, very much influenced by Whitman.
yeah, because that was something that just
Yeah,
sort of jumped out at me from this, but a very different, um, I don't know, more academic, as it were,
Yeah.
take on how the poet interacts
yeah,
with
yeah.
real life and people, and a more separate view as a doctor too.
Mhm.
Although he's so it was just really interesting contrast to me with a lot of what we read from Whitman.
Yeah. Well, Williams, he writes about the fact, he says, my two main influences were Keats and Whitman. Those were the two poets that he loved the best during his college years. And at first he wanted to sound more like Keats, but that's just not going to happen. He doesn't sound like Whitman, but yes, his commitments are in that tradition of Whitmanic poetry, very much so. Yeah. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Oh,
Hey,
Leslie, sorry.
Hi. Okay. So this muse reminded me a lot of a witch. And a lot of this stuff seemed very pagan to me. They had all these stories about people being hag-ridden,
Yeah,
which they would come to them in the night and take them, always flying
yeah.
over something to see something. They'd come back exhausted. But there's a lot of this. First of all, we're in the air. We're looking
Mhm.
down, both as a crow and then a seagull and all this. But because she's a crone, sort of, she's old. And then you have this coming down to earth to do this dark baptism in this filthy water. And it sort of feels like, and he's accepting it, sort of like, not he's selling his soul exactly, but what he's willing to give up
Yeah.
to become a poet is to immerse himself in the real nitty gritty of this, of the life that's surrounding him. So I thought that was sort of cool. But I just, reading this, I was sort of up there in the air with him, checking out all of this stuff and looking at the people from that point of view, and then coming down to earth to submerge. And he sees himself
Mhm.
dying in the
Mhm.
water and coming back out. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. I know. The other time we've seen a witch is the Pauper Witch of Grafton. Remember? I mean, she can get her lover flying around too. Barry.
I also thought a lot as I was reading these poems about his being a doctor and seeing dealing with flesh
Yeah.
and people who are ill and diseased and this kind of, I mean, you can't get more base than what a doctor has to deal with, particularly at that time when we didn't have all the medical technology to insulate the doctors from the viscera of it all. And again, to me, the flying thing was a obviously an attempt to get above all of that and to find a perspective on which to do his poetry. But so to me, his doctoring and then this kind of looking at this kind of people, the mass of people, not particularly beautiful or elevated in any way, was kind of the basis of the whole thing. And I also thought that these first several poems could easily have been one poem. I mean, they're all kind of about the same thing. It's almost like he just kind of stopped and then just continued on with the next one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it all is The Wanderer. That's a Wanderer is a poem in 7 sections. Yeah, but absolutely.
I think it's interesting that Keats was a medical student and had a lot of hospital experience, some of which horrified him, but he learned from it. You wouldn't guess it from his poetry, but I have a feeling that the influence is there, even in Keats's poetry.
Yeah. Yeah, Douglas.
Isn't there an Anglo-Saxon poem, The Wanderer?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
There is. Yeah, there is. Yeah. So, let's move on a little bit. Is there a poem that you guys would like to look at? Because we're probably going to keep going with this early stuff next time because it's like it's being too fun to just let everybody, talk about whatever. But throwing it wide open to you all, is there something that you would like to focus on? Okay, I'm going to be bossy. And I'm going to say that Williams is a great poet writing about women. he is not entirely free from what's the word I want? Weird ideas about women, you know, but he loves women. He loves them
You're
all.
so kind.
I know. In fact, there's a really funny story. Who's it?
Brendan Gill, yeah.
Brendan Gill, writing for the New Yorker. He was working on a group of essays about different writers that he knew, and he would, go around with them. And so in any
He
rest,
was going to write a New Yorker profile of Williams, whom he
so you
really
tell the
admired.
story. You tell the story.
Okay, well,
It's really
he
funny.
went on Williams's medical rounds with him, and what he noticed was that wherever they went, uh, uh, the way it looked to Brendan Gill would be there'd be this dreary, sick baby and a mother who was like overworked and not in good shape and probably suffering from something just as bad herself. And Williams would not just be happy to, work there as a doctor, but he'd come out and he'd say, "What a girl." And he did that with virtually every
Yeah,
female patient he had.
yeah.
And apparently, at one point, Flossie said to him, "Bill, do you want to make love with every woman you meet?" And he thought it over seriously for a couple of minutes and said, "Yes." And Gill decided that he was not going to write that profile, even though it didn't bother him, but he didn't want to, make that public. He
Tarnish
did,
his reputation.
years after Williams's death when
Right,
it didn't matter very much.
right. But is one of the poems that I gave you to waken an old lady, is that one of the ones that you have? Or the widow's lament in springtime? You've got the widow's lament in springtime. Let's look at that one, okay? This is a poem for his mother. His father died. Oh yeah, good. Laurel says I quite like pastoral. We can look at that one too. Yeah, okay. So his dad died. Um, and Williams had a dream after his father died that his father was going up some stairs. Oh, here, you take it.
All right.
And said to Williams, those poems you've been writing, they're no good. So Williams, had kind of unhappy feelings about his dad. But his mother, he was very close to his mother. His mother lived for 20 years, the last 20 years of her life with him and Flossie and the kids, fairly bedridden. And this is a poem that he wrote for his mother after his father died. The Widow's Lament in Springtime. Sorrow is my own yard, where the new grass flames as it has flamed often before, but not with the cold fire that closes round me this year. 35 years I lived with my husband. The plum tree is white today with masses of flowers. Masses of flowers load the cherry branches and color some bushes yellow and some red. But the grief in my heart is stronger than they, for though they were my joy formerly, today I notice them and turn away, forgetting. Today my son told me that in the meadows, at the edge of the heavy woods in the distance, he saw trees of white flowers. I feel that I would like to go there and fall into those flowers and sink into the marsh near them. So, what I'm going to ask you to do is just say anything that you notice about this poem, you collectively. Nothing is too little. Just, what do you notice? Yeah, Barry.
Well, just in your reading of it now, I mean, I was thinking about how free verse is a perfect vehicle for him. And I can't imagine him trying to conform to a rhyme scheme or a metric scheme. His ideas, they seem to come out very free and flowing in free verse. And he isn't, the language is very plain. He's not trying to make you work too hard to figure out what he's talking about, but he's just letting the thoughts flow. And it just seems like a perfect match of his intent to the form of his poetry.
Yeah, he's one of the great practitioners of free verse in American poetry, for some of the reasons that you said. Also, because he's so great with line breaks, as we'll see sometimes. He's so great with shaping a poem. What else do you guys notice? Yeah, Douglas.
And one of the things that I like about a lot of his poems, I mean, he has whole poems on plants,
Yeah.
like Queen Anne's lace and the Great Mullen, and this one he notices the flowers. There's another. He notices the cinquefoil, and he notices all these, and speaks about them because they're part of his world. Whereas most people, when they look at a landscape, they don't see the plants. They see the house and maybe the dog, but do they see the cherry tree or it's just, I don't know. I find it really great.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that was one of the things that bound him and Flossie closest together was their mutual love for flowers and their gardening. Um, Other things that you notice,
Oh,
Neil.
oh, I just lost something here. Oh, sorry, I'm back. Um, it's interesting that the husband only appears once, right? That he made this about her. This is not about him. He's just sort of he's the bystander. Um, and I thought it was, which is fine, I mean, um, and that was interesting at the end where you're seeing the blooms way out there and the
Mhm.
desire to be pulled out of the sorrow and pulled out of the grief a little bit and have a chance to kind of ease back and relax. It was an interesting kind of pulling away from the tightness of the sorrow that you get in the beginning.
Hmm.
That's the sense of they're tightly bound to the sorrow in the earlier age. Anyway, that's sort of
So what do you guys make of the first line? Sorrow is my own yard.
There's this sense of flight and the I just want to escape at the end,
Mm.
and like the dreams where you fly and get away and leave something behind.
So the whole poem is a metaphor, right? Sorrow is my own yard. It's like she's talking about her sorrow. It's all in the voice of the widow.
And it's a yard that's things are happening as they've happened before, but it's not the same.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's so eloquent. 35 years I lived with my husband, you know. And then she says, what? The plum tree is white today with masses of flowers. Masses of flowers load the cherry branches and color some bushes yellow and some red. But the grief in my heart is stronger than they. For though they were my joy formerly, today I notice them and turn away forgetting. And then he puts himself in the poem. Today my son told me. That's him, you know? So he's projecting onto the voice of his mother and then bringing himself back in, writing about the mother's feelings about the father, but not directly writing like, the mother, oh, for our 20th anniversary, so and so. It's all projected onto the yard, the flowers, the colors, the beautiful blossoms. Now, the end of the poem, I guess I read it differently from you guys. I read it very much as a death wish by the end,
Yeah,
you know?
I agree with
Um,
that.
I feel that I would like to go there and fall into those flowers and sink into the marsh near them.
was yeah, the marsh is you're being drawn to the flowers, but it's really lay in the bed and then just
Mm,
disappear in the marsh.
yeah.
Right. They're like, I can't, it's the only way out of this is
Yeah, I mean, there's such grief in this poem, and I think it's so beautifully controlled, you know. So we notice what his basic unit. It's not rhyme and meter. I mean, he can rhyme. The poem The Yachts has some rhyme in it. He can rhyme occasionally, but his basic units of poetry are the rhyme, are the line break, the sentence, where the new grass flames as it has flamed often before, but not with the cold fire that closes around me this year. These are not always syntactic breaks either. Um, and we'll see that. We'll see that after a while when we look at another poem. He's just establishing this kind of tension, this kind of fruitful tension between the line and the sentence, not just breaking lines where you would think he would, where the new grass flames as it has flamed often before, not like that, but he's pulling it, you know. One of his critics talks about the jagged resort of his line breaks, the way he can keep you moving down the page, keep your attention alert, you know. So let's look at the wheelbarrow. Okay. So much depends. So much depends upon a red wheel barrow glazed with rain water beside the white chickens. So this is a sentence. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. But if you just wrote that, you're like, um, whatever, you know. So how is this working? What's happening here? What's going on here? Leslie.
Well, I don't know. I think probably a lot of stuff's going on. But one thing is, I think you're talking about what makes something artistic is the poet or the artist's eye and the conjunction of one particular next to another particular comments on both of them, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask, did you get Bob Philby's illustration he made for
I
you?
did. That cracked me up. The insane chicken flying over the in the rain.
That's not quite what I picked. It's not
No,
quite
it's
what I
not.
pictured when I read this
It's
Not
poem.
the
not, but
poem.
it's quite wonderful.
But he
Yeah,
said he never read the poem.
I know. Yeah, it's really wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, so juxtaposition of images, right? This is a really famous imagist poem. Imagism, as we talked about last time, was a kind of a deliberate movement in the early 20th century. Imagist poems have to be short. They can't be long. They stop being imagist poems if they're very long. And what they are about, duh, is the image. So they set an image before you pictorially, right? And that's all there is to it. They have, they're kind of related to haiku, they're related to paintings. Williams wanted to be a painter before he was a poet. And he's not a good painter, but he was serious about painting and he wrote really intelligently about people like Cezanne and Picasso and people like that. He loved their work. So yeah, that's one thing to notice is we've got what color words, red, white. You set red next to white, it makes both of them more vivid, right? We've got tactile words, glazed. So how does glazed change what we experience in the wheelbarrow? Glazed with rainwater. If something's glazed with rainwater, what happens to that color?
It's very glossy and it seems like it might be reflective a little bit.
Yeah, and it's even shinier. Absolutely. Okay. So like really vivid. And these are not just like dingy old chickens, these are white chickens, right? I mean, there's plenty of white chickens. Now, look at the form of the poem. Tell me about the form.
The line breaks slow you down. And it gives a rhythm to the poem, which is different from the rhythm of the ordinary sentence that you read as an ordinary sentence, but the rhythm of the ordinary sentence is also present. So they're there at the same time. Um, and, by slowing you down and creating that strange, different rhythm, it makes you look sharply at things that you would usually go right past.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how many stanzas do we have? Four. What's the syllable count in each? So much depends. Four syllables. A red wheel. Three. Glazed with rain. Three. Beside the white. Four. Upon. Barrow. Water. Chickens. Two, 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 two. This is a really shapely little poem, right? There's space between each stanza so that you have even more time to kind of move slowly and think, you know? And as one critic points out, depends means hangs upon, and the whole poem hangs upon that word depends, like literally, spatially. It hangs down from it. Okay. So now what does depend upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens? Is this like a koan? Is there an answer?
Well, yeah, because it's sort of it's says something is out there, but it's unrelated to this image. Or so there's the image is there, but it's not a picture. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's there's a wheelbarrow, there's this image that you're seeing, but when you preface it with so much depends, um, it suggests another aspect of it that you're not going to get.
Right? Like what depends?
Yeah.
What depends? You can't help but ask a question. So what do y'all think? Yeah,
Well,
Barry.
it's almost like he's saying, look, I can make a poem out of anything. You
Mhm.
know, I can take a simple, mundane, seemingly mundane combination of elements, and I can make it a poem by the way I juxtapose the words. And the shortness of it again reminds me of a haiku, like you said, where you're forced to look at it, at the poetry of it, because there's nothing really other than that. There's no meaning to probe here. It's just an image, a moment. Um,
Wallace Stevens says the worst poverty is not to live in a physical world, you know? And I think that that's working here. This is a physical world. If we don't actually really sink down into and live in and groove on that physical world, that's the worst poverty, you know? Yeah, Leslie.
Well, I think part of it is um, for not only the artists, but for the people who are in the world observing either poetry or the physical world, is that you have to sort of change how you use your eyes and your other senses. I used to take my students for walks to get out of the classroom, but to take them for walks down by this overflow creek near the school. And we would talk about how you're going to learn, you can't talk, you're going to learn how to see all these things differently because you're going to train yourself to start looking. And I think that this poem is sort of a wake up call for that.
Yeah, I think that's really nice. Absolutely. Sure. Absolutely. I'll tell you guys how. Do you guys remember the University of Laverne near Claremont? Well, I taught there as I was finishing my dissertation, and it was a school that was in danger of losing its accreditation. It was really horrible. Our offices were in a converted grocery store. It was kind of like not real challenging. But I taught poetry and I gave my students this one, and they went off in a small group and they solved the riddle. And they came back and they said, "We know why so much depends upon it, because that's where the farmer keeps the chicken feed." And I'm like, great, but no cigar. And they were so mad at me. They were so mad at me. It's like, how dare you say we're wrong, you know? But it's like, you don't want to look too far for like the answer, because as Leslie says, it's like, wake up, look, you know, here we go. Here's a poem. Here's a thing, you know. Again, to repeat Williams's motto, no ideas but in things. And this is things, right? That we just see. I want to finish today with To Elsie. So, oh, I'm sorry, Douglas.
Oh, I was just going to say that there's other things like it must be a new wheelbarrow because there's no rust,
Yeah.
and it didn't rain real hard because there'd be water in the bottom instead of just glazing it.
Huh.
Hmm.
And the chickens aren't dirty. They're not
Chickens.
It's just a really fresh, crisp picture, you know? To Elsie now. So these poems that we're talking about right now are from Williams's really, really important book, 1923 book, Spring and All, which if you guys get interested in Williams, I would suggest that you read it. It's a mixture of prose and poetry. And it's got some of his best short poems, but it's also got his thinking about the imagination. Now, as Peter says, he is not a very good discursive thinker, but it's a brilliant book. It's a really important book. So to Elsie, and I'm going to tell you who Elsie is. Williams and Flossie had a kind of au pair girl who had been, I think, orphaned, and she was living with them to help take care of the kids. And one day, Williams and Flossie came home from a dinner party, something like that, and they found her tied up. And they found some bureau drawers ransacked. And so naturally, they were concerned, that the house had been burglarized, but nothing was actually missing. And it turned out, with careful questioning, that she had tied herself up. She just wanted there to be some drama in her life. So she had staged this burglary just to get some attention. So this is Elsie. Her name was not really Elsie, it was Sadie, but this is Elsie. And what he's thinking about is the 1920s. He's thinking about the state of culture, not high culture, culture. So what Williams means by culture is everything that's around us, everything that we live. This is our culture. Not just like museums and operas, but, you know, dollar stores, right? This is our culture. So to Elsie, he's thinking about what he feels is going on with American culture in the 1920s. The pure products of America go crazy. Mountain folk from Kentucky or the ribbed north end of Jersey with its isolate lakes and valleys, its deaf mutes, thieves, old names, and promiscuity between devil-may-care men who have taken to railroading out of sheer lust of adventure, and young slatterns bathed in filth from Monday to Saturday, to be tricked out that night with gods from imaginations which have no peasant traditions to give them character, but flutter and flaunt sheer rags, succumbing without emotion save numbed terror under some hedge of chokecherry or viburnum, which they cannot express. Unless it be that marriage, perhaps with a dash of Indian blood, will throw up a girl so desolate, so hemmed around with disease or murder, that she'll be rescued by an agent, reared by the state, and sent out at 15 to work in some hard-pressed house in the suburb, some doctor's family, some Elsie, voluptuous water expressing with broken brain the truth about us, her great ungainly hips and flopping breasts addressed to cheap jewelry and rich young men with fine eyes, as if the earth under our feet were an excrement of some sky, and we degraded prisoners destined to hunger until we eat filth, while the imagination strains after deer going by fields of goldenrod in the stifling heat of September. Somehow it seems to destroy us. It is only in isolate flecks that something is given off. No one to witness and adjust. No one to drive the car. I think it's a really great poem. So he's talking about a lot of different things here. He's talking about what? First of all, the values that people are expressing, male and female, if they have, as he says, no peasant traditions to give them character, right? Which is to say, what, things that have been lost in rapidly modernizing, rapidly industrializing America. He's talking about the facts, and this is very true for Mississippi too, that there are pockets of people, lots of people living out there someplace, you know, whose lives, and I know this from, for instance, teaching at Parchment, whose lives are full of violence, full of poverty, full of, lack of opportunity, full of lack of education. The ribbed north end of Jersey with its isolate lakes and valleys is deaf mutes, thieves, old names, there are the old names, and promiscuity. The devil may care men just want adventure. And the young women. And there's a really heartbreaking turn here, I think. He's talking about them having sex, under the bushes, right? The women succumbing without emotion save numbed terror under some hedge of chokecherry or viburnum, which they cannot express. The dash is there, make that phrase, which they cannot express, point two different ways. They feel numb to terror, which they cannot express with these one night stands, with these fly by night guys. But also they can't express chokecherry, viburnum. They don't know the plants. They don't know where they are. And the failure to know where they are, which is to say, to be able to ground down in the physical world, gives everything this kind of fly by night, devil may care, hurry here, hurry there, you know, careless, uncaring, unfeeling promiscuity, right? And he doesn't just mean people sleeping with people, he means people without feeling sleeping with people. And then he says, and then he talks about Elsie, Sadie, unless it be that there is a girl whose situation is so desperate that the state grabs her out of her environment and sends her to some doctor's family. That's his family. That's his house. Sent out at 15 to work in some hard-pressed house in the suburbs. He describes her as voluptuous water, you know, this great floppy female. But look at this, expressing with broken brain the truth about us, that us is really important. He's not saying, oh, we know what's really good and important, and my children are going to college. He's saying it's all of us. It's all of us that are in this cultural moment, which is so debased and so destructive. Hang on just a sec, okay? As if the earth under our feet were an excrement of some sky, as if that's what our earth is, as if our earth is just shit, but it's not. And we degraded prisoners destined to hunger until we eat filth. And then you get this longing for this other image. The imagination strains after deer going by fields of goldenrod in the stifling heat of September. Somehow it seems to destroy us. And then this final great image of, you know, Elon Musk's ideal, the driverless car. Headlong down the highways, no one to witness and adjust, no one to drive the car. Nobody's in control here. Nobody's in charge here. Nobody can make the adjustments. Nobody can even witness. It's just racing on without us. Douglas.
I was just going to say that it. One thing to remember is that, or for me anyway, that at the time he was writing in the 20s, poverty was widespread. There wasn't even really just pockets. It was everywhere before Social Security. You know, old people were generally impoverished. And, that just, it's poignant as he describes it.
Absolutely. You know, this is the same era as The Great Gatsby, you know, and you get this feeling, you're absolutely right, that there are all these lives, people living as through us as lives of quiet desperation, or maybe not so quiet desperation, noisy desperation, you know?
There are a lot of them in The Great Gatsby,
Yeah,
George and Myrtle Wilson and,
yeah,
the others, their guests.
yeah, yeah, Leslie.
It reminds me a lot of the part of the wasteland where he's describing the young typist who gets the tins of food out and doesn't care what's going on to her and just says, I'm glad that's over. It's just
Absolutely.
the same feeling of look how degraded this has become. And as you say, not just sex, but it's the whole culture.
Yeah. And the
Yeah,
young men carbuncular, you know, great phrase. Yeah, absolutely. And the Thames maidens, you know, on Margate Sands, I can connect nothing with nothing. My people, humble people, you know, in the wasteland again, those little songs of not the Rhine maidens, but the Thames maidens. He promised a fresh start. What should I expect? You know, this kind of absolutely degraded, meaningless sexuality, which is not, it's not grounded. It's not, it might be fertile, but only in a bad way, you know?
Sex without meaning, sex without passion. But in the Williams poem, there's a suggestion of real violence and something out of control.
Yeah.
Whereas in The Wasteland, it's more a sense of apathy, which
Yeah.
is terrifying in its own way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it
But
reminded me
is
of that phrase from the earlier poem about mirroring modernity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's mirroring it, and what he sees is not pretty.
Absolutely.
Um,
But
Absolutely.
why is it the whole culture? Am I misunderstanding? He's using her meaninglessness and as it reflects the entire culture. Is that what we're seeing?
Yeah. That's what he's seeing around.
But
And
he, in order to be able to observe her meaninglessness, he's not inhabiting that meaninglessness. Isn't that
it's
true?
shedding, it's true, but it's shedding light back on the haves. It's like the haves and the have-nots, you know what I mean? The fact that she is in such a she and other people like her, other girls, other guys like her, are living such lives of noisy desperation or whatever, reflects back on the failure of the people who should be able to witness and adjust, who should be able to, metaphorically speaking, drive the car. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I think I agree,
I'm
Tony, that
there's
it's a
something
jump
about,
to
I'm
say the
sorry, Peter. What?
I'm sorry I interrupted you. I agree with you. It's a jump to say the whole culture. That is,
Yeah,
there are connections
because
there that are not made by the poem, powerful as the poem is. And I'm not sure that I think they're kind of tenuous connections. If that's,
I mean, I think my feeling was, how is he in a position, if you were a friend of hers in the same life that he describes her having, you wouldn't recognize the meaninglessness of it or the desperation of it. It would just be your life. Whereas
Oh,
he has to
America.
stand outside it, and the culture that he inhabits stands is different, isn't it? From her life. And so that's why he can recognize it.
Mhm.
Um, I I maybe this isn't an appropriate association, but I worked for the welfare department for 3 years or so. And the description he gives of her is very much like my clients. There was not poverty, the poverty was really not primarily about money. It was
Mhm.
about a lack of the concept of life ever being any different,
Yeah.
like there being anything outside that they could hope for. And he recognizes that in her, but
Mhm.
I think the people in the world that I was serving, the welfare recipients, don't recognize that. That
Mhm.
is just life.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think you make a really good point, sure. But I think it's really important that two different times he says us, expressing the truth about us, that this is not somebody dabbling his fingers and saying, oh, the poor, the nasty poor. This is somebody who's like really trying to think about the way the whole culture is implicated in this breakdown of things that actually really would feed the imagination. And I mean, I think about what's happening right now in our country, with education, with lack of jobs, with whatever, all that stuff that's going on,
With whatever.
that whatever. Douglas.
yeah, and also as a sort of a semi-rural or suburban family doctor, he saw the underbelly of the culture.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, he really did. I seriously recommend that you read the doctor stories. They're really good, especially one called Gene Beakey, and they're tough. They're tough as nails. Um, because it wasn't a situation where you could be all, soft and so on. He's really trying to help people, really trying to take care of people. But these are people who are not Park Avenue patience, you know.
The use of force, that's a really good
The use
story.
of force is really good. Yeah. Yeah. And
You,
those
you,
are
in what way you say they're tough? In what way?
just read them. Just,
It's
Um,
like
I mean,
that's like that.
they're
they
really
they
short.
face the ugly side of things,
Oh, I
physical and
see.
Yeah.
I
social.
see.
Yeah.
I guess what I was asking is he tough on them, on his characters, the
No,
way
he's
that
not.
maybe Flannery O'Connor would be
Oh,
in
no.
her.
No, 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 no.
No,
Jean Beakey, for instance, is about this poor little baby who's like 8 months old and she is scrawny and misshapen and she's the one saving grace about her is that she's always hungry. She's always hungry. She's in the hospital. She's abandoned. Her mom can't keep her, you know, and eventually she dies, but they're trying as hard as they can to save her, and they can't figure out what's the matter with her, you know. And so I'm not going to tell you what they eventually find out, but it's like it's really a gripping story, and it's about this passionate desire to try to save this misshapen little kid, this homely little kid who's like not going to have any chance in life to amount to much of anything anyway. But still, there's this absolute dedication to trying to find out what's the matter with her.
What was the name of that poem?
Jean Beakey, Jean. That's her name. And
Short
then,
story.
yeah, it's a short story. It's a short story. Bieke, I think. Jean Beakey, Jean Beakey.
And is the conversation in the beginning of Cora and Hell? That's about his mom?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the women in his life were really something, you know? Yeah.
what do
Well,
you mean?
guys,
Oh,
what do I
you have to
mean?
go. Yeah,
They
what do you what?
his mom, his mom's first language was Spanish, by the way. So he grew up in a household, a kind of strange household. His mom's first language was Spanish. His dad was an English subject who was a traveling salesman, gone a lot into Central America selling Florida water. Um, you know, he and his brother were both expected to be sort of perfect, hard, like really studious, well-behaved sons. Um, but he was passionately um, close to his mother. He cared a lot about her. He writes a whole book called Yes, Mrs. Williams, when he says he wants to be the bridge between her and silence. Because there she is, you know, as a Puerto Rican woman of very mixed racial origin. Not really, she's living in Rutherford, New Jersey, and she's kind of like a fish out of water. She had wanted to be an artist, but she couldn't do that for financial reasons. Um, so he's very devoted to her, but he's not like he's never, you know, sentimental. It's not like, oh, my beloved mama. He's like, she's kind of a tough old coot, and he's a tough old coot. And then Grandma, Emily Dickinson was just, or Emily Welcome, she was just a character, you know. When you read
The
next time the last words of my English grandmother, you'll find out what she sounds like, and it's a great little poem.
the bridge between her and silence, that is quite a phrase. Does that mean he intends to fill in for her in speaking for her? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, he's writing about her and he's writing to her. I haven't read Yes, Mrs. Williams for quite some time, but it's very much a book of just saying yes to her, to who she is, and trying to represent her words in this book, you know? Yeah. Well, guys, have a really great Thanksgiving. Next time we're gonna keep on with some of these early poems, especially what I think of as the single greatest short poem that he wrote, which is By the Road to the Contagious Hospital. And then we'll continue on into William Cross Williams Part Two, okay? And we will eventually get to some of the late poems. And have a really great Thanksgiving, and I will see you then.
Bye.
All
Bye.
right. Bye bye, everybody.